Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Andrew Erickson, and today we're going to be discussing my 10 players and matchups you must avoid in Week 16. But first, if you want a chance to win a signed Deebo Samuel 11x14 photo courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, all you have to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now, comment below in this video, and that's it. Make sure to turn on those notifications to know when new videos drop and to find out if you've won. Now, let's get to those lineup landmines. Derek Carr, Las Vegas Raiders at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Derek Carr has come alive since the return of TJ Watt back in Week 10. They've allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks over that span, facing the league's second lowest passing attempts per game at 27 and just 204 passing yards per game, which ranks 6th best. The return of Derek Carr's weapons makes him look enticing on the surface as a streamable option in Week 16, but the matchup says otherwise. Brian Robinson Jr., Washington Commanders at the San Francisco 49ers. Brian Robinson rushed 12 times for 89 yards and 0 touchdowns, leading the Commanders' backfield with a 59% opportunity share in Week 15. Per usual, Antonio Gibson was the most involved receiver, commanding 4 targets while tallying 5 carries for 21 yards. He also lost a fumble. Antonio Gibson also outsnapped Robinson 60% versus 38%, and he ran more routes, 24 versus 5, with Washington facing a negative game script for the majority of Sunday Night Football. Robinson also fell victim to a ticky-tack illegal formation penalty that wiped off a goal line fourth quarter touchdown. But with him, specifically with Brian Robinson, he's so game script dependent, it's difficult to trust him versus the 49ers defense that ranks number 1 in fewest fantasy points per game allowed to running backs this season. The Commanders are 7-point road dogs, and B-Rob has glaring splits when Washington has lost this year. In their last 2 losses, Robinson has averaged just 12.5 carries and just 8 fantasy points per game. Royce Freeman, Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. We saw the post-Dameon Pierce offense in Houston versus the Chiefs, and it was ugly. Royce Freeman led the way with a 43% opportunity share, carrying the ball 11 times for 51 yards. He had 1 target and 1 carry inside the 10-yard line. But Dare Ogunbowale started the game and led the team in carries in the first half, 7 for 12 yards. He also played the most snaps at 43% and ran the most routes, but was not targeted. Rex Burkhead had 2 catches for 17 yards on 4 targets, which led the backfield. Avoid them all best you can with the Titans' elite run defense up next. They have allowed the second fewest rushing yards per game to running backs since Week 9, allowing just 2.9 yards per carry. When Pierce faced this defense earlier in the season, he rushed for 35 yards on a whopping 15 carries. Zay Jones, Jacksonville Jaguars at the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. Trust the process, folks. We have gone a perfect 3 for 3 fading the number 2 wide receivers facing the New York Jets on the past 3 weeks. So yes, that means it's time for Zay Jones to ride the pine despite how hot he has been over the last month. But again, New York has allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers since Week 6. They're ranked 6th in DVOA versus number 2 wide receivers, allowing the 4th fewest receiving yards per game at 37 to opposing number 2s. Jones seems impossible to sit with 3 top 10 finishes in his last 4 games, but a wide receiver 77 to finish against the Detroit Lions just a few weeks ago is a friendly reminder that he's still very much a boom or bust proposition. Wide receiver Michael Gallup, Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly is allowing the second fewest fantasy points per game to perimeter wide receivers at 8.6 this season. For that reason, you can't view Michael Gallup as a legitimate wide receiver 3/flex option, especially with his recent usage. He saw just 2 targets in Dallas' overtime loss last week, despite a 91% snap share. I'm afraid the Eagles' strong cornerback tandem on the boundary will limit Gallup in his 17% target share since Week 10. Philly ranks 1st in DVOA versus number 1 wide receivers this year. Gerald Everett, Los Angeles Chargers tight end at the Indianapolis Colts. Tight end Gerald Everett finished with 6 targets in Week 15, catching 4 balls for 42 yards. But the number 2 tight end Darnell Parham went 3 for 35 on his 3 targets. Parham's return reduced Everett's role substantially as a starter ran a route on just 62% of the dropbacks. Not great for Everett's fantasy value for the rest of the season, with Parham being a thorn in his side. Not to mention, he's a tough matchup to overcome versus the Colts' stingy defense in Week 16. Indianapolis ranks 4th in fewest fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends since Week 4. They've allowed just 39 receiving yards per game to all tight ends they have faced over that time frame, and they've recently held TJ Hockenson, Dalton Schultz, Pat Freiermuth, all under 40 receiving yards in their last 3 games played. Tight end Cole Kmet, Chicago Bears versus the Buffalo Bills. The targets are there for the taking for Cole Kmet in the Bears offense with all the injuries to their wide receivers, but that was the exact case last week, and Kmet caught 4 passes for 25 yards on a team-high 5 targets. With inclement weather on tap in Week 16 featuring winds up to 18 miles per hour and temperatures in the single digits, we could easily see the Bears go full-on Operation Ground and Pound like they did earlier in the year. That could leave Kmet with little to work with, even as the team's number 1 pass catcher. And and the matchup specifically versus the Buffalo Bills defense is tough. They rank first in DVOA against tight ends this season and have allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to the position since week 8. Wide receiver Chris Olave for the New Orleans Saints at the Cleveland Browns. The Saints have the lowest implied team total on the slate this week due to projected horrible weather conditions in Cleveland. The early forecast call for winds up to 25 miles per hour and freezing temperatures at 10 degrees. But with the wind chill, it will feel sub-zero-like conditions. Not ideal for fantasy football purposes on either side in the passing game. Therefore, you cannot have strong faith in any Saints passing weapon, including Chris Olave. The rookie has cooled off considerably over the last 3 weeks with 3 finishes outside the top 40 wide receivers. The Saints are -6 pass rate over expectation, have thrown early downs on just 43% of their plays in their last 2 games. And in week 15, Olave played fewer than 50% of the snaps and ran fewer routes than Rashid Shaheed. There's not much upside for Olave in this spot with almost no chance for downfield splash plays. Keep in mind the Ohio State product ranks in the bottom 20 in yards after the catch per reception this season. Wide receiver Amari Cooper for the Cleveland Browns against the New Orleans Saints. Again, for all the same reasons that you should be fading Olave in a game with a shockingly low 31.5 point total in our great year of 2022, you should be doing the same with the Browns passing game, most notably with Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Since Deshaun Watson took over the starting quarterback duties 3 weeks ago, Cooper has yet to finish better than wide receiver 44 in any week, despite a team-leading 26% target share. He's averaged just over 3 catches for 47 yards on 7 targets per game. Cleveland's run-heavy nature, -6% pass rate over expectation the last 3 weeks, is doing no favors for Cooper's fantasy value. I'd hardly expect them to dial up the pass attack, even if they showed flashes of a more pass-happy approach in week 15, 4th highest pass rate on early downs, based on the projected forecast being extremely windy. Last week, the wind was half of what the forecast projects, and Watson posted a 4.6 average depth of throw, which was 3rd lowest among all quarterbacks in week 15. Amari Cooper led the team with a whopping 40 air yards. Running back Deontay Foreman, Carolina Panthers versus the Detroit Lions. Chuba Hubbard went 4 for 10 in 0 rushing and 3 for 57 as a receiver on 3 targets in week 15. Hubbard also led the Panthers backfield in snaps at 63%, with Carolina down in the second half. He ran a route on 57% of the dropbacks. Meanwhile, Deontay Foreman finished with just 9 rushing yards on 10 carries, with 0 targets, 30% snap share. He was stuffed twice at the goal line, thrice inside the 10-yard line, and just ran 2 routes, which was the same as Rasheem Blackshear. No ground game to speak of in Carolina. After his abysmal performance and downtick in usage, Foreman cannot be trusted against a Lions run defense that ranks, checks notes, number 1 versus running backs in fantasy since week 6. He is way too risky. The Panthers fall behind with the Lions' high-octane offense scoring at will. And that completes my breakdown of 10 players and matchups you must avoid in week 16. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and share with all your non-league mate friends. But before you go, if you want a chance to win a signed Deebo Samuel 11x14 photo, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, all you have to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now, comment below this video, and that's it. Make sure to turn on those notifications to know when new videos drop and to find out if you've won.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.